Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can find and subscribe to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our site, vmspod.com, to find more information, as well as our RSS feed, which you can plug into any podcatcher so you never miss an episode of the Virtual Memories Show. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube, where I go by vmspod, and subscribe to my semi-weekly newsletter at buttondown.com/vmspod. Well, I just got off the phone with a government agency, and I sort of committed to making a trip to South Korea in October as a kind of trade mission. It'll be right in the middle of fall trade show season for me when I've got a whole bunch of other trips and conferences, including the one that I have to put on, which would be like a week before this. Well, maybe 3 days before this. But why not drive myself into the ground? I have never been to Korea, and figure I can squeak one more year out of this body with all the travel and everything. Might even find a podcast to record with there before I head out. But if it does go off on the dates they propose, it's also going to fall on a sort of interesting anniversary day for me and the podcast. But I will fill you in on that in about 2 months' time. But I don't know, it's just kind of funny that my life is like this. Like, hey, Gil, we want to schedule a call. And by the end, it's, trying to figure out if they can get me out to Korea or not. I mean, yesterday I was down in Princeton for coffee with a biotech policy guy. And I got in early and I visited Labyrinth Books, as is my wont. Picked up a new collection, small collection by Simon Critchley, and a paperback of Roland Barthes' Morning Diary. And the cashier and I got into a little conversation about Critchley. He'd seen the book on the table and was thinking of buying it himself. And I mentioned the podcast that I recorded with Simon, as well as the live ones that I've done at Labyrinth with other guests. And he said he would go look it up and go listen if he can remember the name of the show. Then I mentioned my name, and he said, "Oh, that's familiar," which was, I'll be honest, flattering and puzzling in equal amounts. I'm hoping he just remembers my name from the flyers that Labyrinth had about the live episodes, but knowing me, it's going to turn out to be some other completely random point of connection, but that's what I get for putting myself out in the world. I get recognized in bookstores and invited to South Korea. So, not apropos of that, let's get to this week's show. My guest this time is Sacha Mardou, who has a fantastic graphic memoir out now called Past Tense: Facing Family Secrets and Finding Myself in Therapy. It's published by Avery and came out last October. And we talk about why we're getting to it now in the conversation. Well, it's all kind of there in the subtitle. I'm going to be honest. Facing Family Secrets and Finding Myself in Therapy. That's what this book is about. Sacha, at around the age of 40, a Manchester, England native who is living in St. Louis, married with a kid, comes to understand that she is carrying a lot of emotional and psychological baggage, and that it is manifesting itself in a lot of ways in her midlife, especially physically. And the book takes us on Sacha's 3-year journey in therapy with a focus on internal family systems, or IFS, which I'd never heard of and learned a lot about over the course of the book. In the process, she also relates to us some of that truly terrible family history, including domestic violence, incest, and other forms of abuse, as well as the, as she puts it, almost soap opera quality of some of the family dynamics that end up spiraling out of all this. But the thing is, all this stuff got pushed down in a, we don't talk about it English way, even English working class way, as she was raised. And in the book, she does this great job of really conveying the destructive spirals that can lead us down. And over the course of like 300 plus pages, Sacha relates her therapy sessions, her reflexive rejection of looking too far inside, and how, or really what it takes to overcome that and to bring about real change. And as we talk about in the episode, it is a book that I don't know if I'd have appreciated without going through some changes of my own recently, which we talk about. But Past Tense really is a remarkable memoir in the ways it brings the reader through the labyrinth, and also, raises the prospect that despite the traumas and circumstances and upbringing and everything else that we face, we can become better people to ourselves and to others. Now, I know last week's episode was also a memoir about change and kind of psychology. In that case, it was Oliver Radcliffe's transition to mask. And I don't want you thinking that every episode going forward is going to be strictly, mental health focused. But maybe that's sort of what I need just now as I get back into doing these shows. I don't know. I could go on and on in this vein, as you know. I didn't talk about the specifics of Sacha's circumstances because about 13, 14 minutes into the conversation, she'll really kind of open up about the family secrets and her later in life symptoms and what ultimately drove her into therapy and how beneficial it all turned out to be. I'll say that Past Tense has me kind of sort of admitting that it is past time I actually talk to someone. I mean, I talk to friends about what I've gone through and what I'm going through. Maybe I need to have someone that I'm paying for it, I guess. Might wait a little while until the roller coaster of Dad's death subsides. But I'm glad this book is here to kind of guide me along, Now, as caveats go, Sacha's audio channel was a little low. I tried to adjust for that. Here's her bio. Sacha Mardou studied English literature at the University of Wales and started making comics in the late 1990s. Her previous work includes the serially released graphic novel Sky in Stereo, which was Ignatz nominated for Best Series in 2014, named an Outstanding Comic of 2015 by The Village Voice, and shortlisted for the Slate Studio Award in 2016. Her online therapy comics have been featured in the Huffington Post and Bored Panda. Since 2005, she's been a resident of St. Louis, Missouri, where she lives with her cartoonist husband, Ted May, their daughter, and 2 disruptive cats. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Sacha Mardou. Tell me, this will sound weird, because the genesis of the book is within the book, but tell me about the process of making Past Tense. And we can talk about the process of the therapy that goes into the function itself, but tell me about the process of making the book.
Yeah.
And
I got the book deal in 2021, I believe. And I actually started making the online comics that kind of became the book in 2019. So I'd been making the book, not realizing I was making a book in my sketchbook. But in 2021, I got like a book deal and had to really formalize the process. And so I had to basically decide what therapy sessions were going to go into the story and how to weave in the family story. So I basically had to sit down and just, write this story from scratch and then weave in all the pieces that I already had kind of written, if that makes sense. And I think a large part of the process was actually in the writing, going back and forth with my editor until we had a script that, kind of worked. And then came the process of doing the thumbnails and doing a huge, the big thumbnail draft, which went through a couple of itinerations. And then when it came to finally doing the art, I think I had like less than a year. It was like about 6 months to do all the art.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was a super fast turnaround, but most of it had been spent in writing and kind of assembling the book and doing the thumbnails, you know.
Yeah, tell me about that process of writing and editing, which I guess dives into the 3 years of therapy that become the book itself. But the process of assessing yourself in the process of how you were changing and turning that into the story that you'd ultimately tell.
That's an
Or we could talk about the therapy itself and the whole backstory that goes into it if you'd rather.
We can talk about any of it, but the idea
there.
of like assessing myself as to what went into it, that was really interesting because deciding to make this book was actually part of what ended up in the story. You know, why do you turn your very personal therapeutic healing into something public, you know? And I made that decision kind of 2 years into therapy in 2019 when I decided to start releasing little therapy vignettes on social media. And it was the response to those that really made me feel like this was something important. This was something resonant that people, you know, did want to read from me. So it was a whole process in 2019 before I came to write the book, where I basically assessed that this was going to be my material for the next few years, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, let me ask you, you talk about that English reticence to express anything or have emotion, or at least express emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, how therapy is frowned upon because, you know, we'll just keep these problems to ourselves. Was making the therapy notes, the comic strips public more or less difficult for you than the decision to start therapy itself?
More difficult. Yeah, I had a real crisis when I released like one of the very earliest therapy comics I made. That I released because I was making them privately, you know. I posted it on social media and it did pretty well for one of my stories, you know. It did a lot better than what I was used to. Way more likes and views, and I had a complete shame backlash, and I had to basically go to therapy and say, look, this is awful. Like, people are interested in my story, and it's, you know, and it's really embarrassing to kind of share it. Like, there's a part of me that feels like, who do you think you are to, like, you know, crap on your family like this and tell your story? And so that took work, definitely. The assessment and, you know, deciding to kind of do that was way harder than making the book, for sure.
Did you also worry about the performance, the online performance aspect of things? Oh, I need to come up with something that's going to get more likes. Or were you already, sort of past that aspect of how we're all governed by our online validation?
You know, I wasn't. I was...
Good.
Because of the feedback that I was getting in the comments section. So I'd post something about an aspect of therapy or about, you know, like a breakthrough I'd had in therapy. And it would feel risky to put that out there. And that has never really gone away. It still feels risky, you know, and I think that would counteract any kind of performative aspect that might be there, because it still feels emotionally risky to kind of share this stuff. And I've never gotten completely comfortable with it. I've gotten more comfortable with it. But then the response that I got in the comments section is kind of like it's the instant feedback, you know, and when people respond to it and say, like, this happened to me too, or I've been through this too, or this is something real for me, there's a real sense of kind of, I'm trying to find the right word.
You could say responsibility.
It's responsibility, but it's like sincerity. It's like, this kind of has to come from the heart, you know. I can't really fake that. And so if I do reach a point where I've got nothing else to say, then I think it will be time to move on. I'm still finding things. One of the things that I didn't really address that much in therapy, but kind of came up a lot, was I was raised a Jehovah's Witness in my teen years. And it's, you know, it's a Christian sect. It's very high control religion, and it qualifies scientifically as a cult, you know. And I've been finding, like, parts of myself that didn't fully get to express in therapy, and I've still been doing work around that. And so, yeah, I keep wondering, when am I going to run out of, like, emotional things to talk about? And it's not happened yet, but this is like 6 years on. So, yeah, we'll see.
Well, the way I figure it, you're near my age. We've experienced some life. It'd be one thing if you were like 25 and
I agree.
Publishing your third memoir at that age.
Absolutely, yeah. And, you know, there is a sense also that being, you know, I turned 50 this year, so I started therapy 10 years ago. So this is, you know, I'm kind of like past tense is 10 years ago for me, even though the book just came out last year. But there is a sense like I'm an elder now, and there does come responsibility with that. And I have a teenage daughter, and it's very important to me that I make meaningful work, and this feels really meaningful. So while I still have things to say on the subject, yeah, I'm still going to make therapy comics.
I'm glad you did. I will say, when this came out, I wasn't ready for it, and it's because this was last October, and you and I had corresponded around then, and I had such a avalanche of books in that I lost track and everything. But I realized reading it more recently, I had a sort of breakthrough in November, just a month or so after the book came out, that put me in a better position to read your book and appreciate what's there. So I'm sort of glad I didn't take you up on it when it was first coming out, because I think I would have been more distant. Yeah. Which is to say, there's a lot in here that beyond and I'll just say it, incredibly messed up details of your family's history. There's an awful lot that's universal and helps. I'll put it again, that sincerity about the psyche and what we do to ourselves, and what is done to us that we take responsibility for when we should not be taking responsibility for, when we're children. That's stuff that really resonated with me. Now, one of the things that I was curious about, as you mentioned, it's been 10 years since this whole process. The book sort of ends with 2020 Sacha talking to 2017 Sacha. How does 2025 Sacha interact with those iterations of yourself?
You know, those past selves are all kind of online with me. They're still online for me because I still do the work of, I talk about internal family systems therapy in the book. It's called IFS for short. And it's something that you can kind of take out of therapy. So I learned how to do it with my therapist, but it's basically a process where you kind of sit and get quiet and you listen to those inner voices, like the inner critic that nags at you. You know, you kind of have a bit of curiosity and patience. And it's like, okay, well, why is this part so mad at me? You know, so that kind of form of inquiry is still very much an active process for me. And so these parts are still there and I still communicate with them. And what I feel is a sense of gratitude because, you know, had I not had this crisis 10 years ago and finally gone to therapy, I can't imagine where I'd be at now. Like, the world is a lot messier now. The external world is a lot messier now than it was 10 years ago. And I don't think I'd be coping so well. So there's a real sense of gratitude that, you know, I'm not living with chronic anxiety every day. I kind of wake up, you know, and I'm
what's wrong with you? I'm just kidding. Go on.
I kind of wake up and I still like fret about the world and I'm scared to look at the news and that kind of stuff. But in terms of the way I talk to myself and live my life, I'm not in a constant state of hypervigilance and fear and anxiety. And that is, it's such a gift, you know. So I'm constantly grateful is the short answer to that that long-winded answer I just gave you. Yeah, I'm grateful.
You know me. I prefer the long-winded.
Okay.
That's good. Do you stay in touch with either of the therapists who are in the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I sent a copy of my book to the therapist I call Sally. And I didn't hear back from her, and it's like, that's totally fine. I think she was aware at the time that I was making comics, and one of the things she'd said is, just make me look nice. That's one of her parts speaking. It's like, okay. But she was never that, you know, we never really kind of got into my creative life, and that wasn't really, you know, work that we did together. And then the therapist I call Chris in the book, we still email from time to time. When the book came out, we met for coffee, and I gave him a copy of the book, and it was a really wonderful moment, you know, like full circle. And so he's been incredibly supportive, and, you know, he's a big reader and he's very invested in the arts. And so to him, having a client that was, you know, going to make a book about the therapy process and about his form of being a therapist, I think he was secretly quite pleased with that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's secret. I think he, at least the way you frame him in the book or portray him in the book, he sees himself as a character in, you know, what you're going to ultimately make.
It's kind of funny as well, because
way.
Obviously I kind of like hide his, you know, I hide everybody's personality, everybody's character is kind of like shrouded identity. Yeah. But he did tell me that a couple of his clients figured it out, and he's like, "Is this you?" And he was like, "Yeah." So
it's it's beyond the therapist's reaction to these things. You write a lot about your family and a lot of tough stuff about your upbringing and things that happened in your life. You do talk about getting permission and giving yourself permission to write about them. How's the response been from family members?
It's been just fine. So like I didn't get any trouble, and it's also been surprisingly wonderful in certain ways. Like I've an aunt who isn't in the book, who reads my work online, actually was raving to my mum like how much the book kind of helped her identify her own like anxiety and the source of that. And so that was really surprising. My half sister was the person who the book is addressed to, and she's found the book kind of helpful as a way to sort of use this book to show her new family, her husband and her, her kids, and actually talk about her past with them, because so much of our past was just something we didn't talk about, shrouded in kind of secrecy and embarrassment. And so, yeah, for those listeners who haven't read my book, my father, who I'm estranged from, he's still alive, but he was incarcerated back in the 1980s for sexually abusing my stepsister. And my mum had a lot of like trauma in her early years, which I think was kind of passed on to me in her parenting style. And then she became a Jehovah's Witness when I was 12. And so that was a whole new level of kind of trauma. So yeah, my family has kind of been through some stuff. And I also talk about the legacy of generational trauma. So my grandmother, on my mother's side, lived through World War II and, lived in a heavily bombarded area of Manchester. And so, she basically lived through war. And I feel like that worked its way into our family story as well. And so my book takes a big lens on all the things that went wrong in my family. And, I try and put the pieces together as I kind of heal myself. And the hope is, as you said, that there's something universal in that, because, mine isn't the only family who lived through a war. Of course not, and mine isn't the only family who's had like incest and sexual assault happen in it. And so I've tried to show these things in terms of healing, and how it took time. It took 3 years of therapy, but how this story unfolded slowly, and I was able to reclaim those pieces and heal.
I'll say for some people, some friends of mine and people I've talked to, 3 years would not have been anywhere near enough. Mm-hmm. And I wonder for you, how much did it mean to go into therapy at the age at which you did? Do you think it would have been as useful for you younger? Would you have had the perspective, I guess?
Yeah.
What do you think? Would it have helped if you'd started this younger, or do you feel like you needed some of the life perspective that
I wonder about this a lot, and I really don't know. Like, a part of me feels sad that I waited so long to kind of get therapy and find this healing. The other part of me thinks that I was in the right place at the right time with the right therapist, and I could have entered therapy in my 20s and found someone who didn't really help me that much, and that would have put me off therapy. So who knows, Yeah. So I have to kind of like accept the way it was. And for me, I think starting therapy at the age of, I was 41. There was a real sense of urgency about it, because I tried everything else, everything holistic I could get my hands on. I'd tried, and nothing was working. And I had this acne that was caused by my anxiety. So I had like a very outward facing reason to try and address my anxiety at its root. And there was a lot going on in it. So yeah, I do appreciate the fact that I was 40 and I had a sense of urgency, and I had a kid. So I had a reason to kind of heal myself as well. I don't want to kind of kick this down the road and traumatize my daughter.
Which, again, we talk about transgenerational experience. Yeah. How did it change your parenting or your relation to your daughter?
It put me in touch with my own inner children. I know how corny and fey that sounds, but
no, that's exactly the breakthrough I had in November.
Yeah,
a friend of mine helped me reframe something I was going through as an inner child thing. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing it's completely appropriate, and it's entirely changed my life since I've embraced that. But in the moment, you still feel like it's corny language.
Exactly. As a soundbite, it sounds so cheesy. And then when you actually do the work of being with these parts of yourself, it feels like the deepest truth. And it felt like the deepest truth. And when I was able to kind of get in touch with how it actually felt for me as a kid and what I couldn't express as a kid, and to put all that into words, it gave me a whole new perspective on like being with my daughter. Like, she is the person right now living through living through her life. And I could see what I was going through at her age. And some parts of me would often give me helpful advice. Like, I met a teenage part of myself in session, and she said to me, like, when your daughter's feeling bad, don't make her feel bad for feeling bad. And it was such good advice. Like, yeah, my kid's a teenager. She's going to have mood swings, and I don't have to make her like feel bad on top of that. I can just let things be, you know. I can be relaxed around my daughter's many moods, and that sense that I can kind of like tend to myself as a parent, you know, because my kid is going to trigger me. She's going to trigger stuff that happened in the past. That happens, you know, but you can actually tend to yourself and like make repairs in the relationship. And so it gave me like a kind of freedom and a way. It gave me a whole framework to kind of understand what I was going through as a parent that was triggered by the past, and actually deal in this present moment with my, you know, with what my daughter was going through. So I think it's made me a more nimble parent. And my relationship with my daughter is pretty good. I mean, she's 16 now, and
so it can't be perfect.
It can't be perfect, no, and I wouldn't expect myself to be. That would be very unfair, right? But yeah, it's definitely helped for sure. And I would recommend Therapy to any parent. There's actually a great therapist called Dr. Becky Kennedy, and she mainly deals with, you know, like parenting younger children, but she's very much informed by the same therapy model that I used in therapy, internal family systems. And she, you know, she teaches parents like how to talk to yourself as you're parenting a younger person. She's really great. So,
were there other modalities or anything else you got exposed to? You kind of show going from your therapist into IFS and that opening you up. Were there dead ends at all that didn't make it into the book? Or was that pretty much you happen to luck into a model that worked really well for you?
No, there actually weren't any dead ends. Obviously, there were many sessions that I had to kind of like leave out just so that the book wouldn't be 1,000 pages long. But no, both my therapists used other modalities, and, you know, they were kind of up for grabs if we needed them. But internal family systems was such a good fit that I ended up just using IFS and talk therapy. But both my other therapists used EMDR as well. That was modalities they had. And yeah, I did look into that, and it's super interesting. And I've talked to a lot of people who've used EMDR. I can't tell you what that stands for. It's eye movement desensitization response, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's it. Two of my past guests have mentioned it.
It's apparently fantastic. And you can use it with IFS. Apparently you can, you know, use parts work, which is the colloquial name for IFS. You can use parts work with stuff that comes up in EMDR. And so it's a very... it's a very adaptable kind of model, which is something I liked about it. Since leaving therapy that I talk about in the book, I have actually done some somatic experiencing with a practitioner, and that's been really good. I've got a lot of dental issues, and so I had like some dental issues which didn't show up on an X-ray, and so I did some somatic sessions to try and get to the root of that, pardon the pun, and that really worked. But I did use IFS while I was doing the somatic experiencing, because the somatic experiencing went so fast that my parts were like, whoa, slow down, we need to process this. So that was really interesting, and it totally worked as well. I had TMJ and like teeth grinding, and the somatic experiencing really helped with that. So
nice. The R, by the way, in EMDR is reprocessing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's the one upshot of doing these remotely instead of in person, is that we can actually look stuff up while we're talking. Absolutely. The downside is you end up goofing around on the internet, but that's at least pretty good. I'm not going to make a tooth problem British reference outside of the fact that I already have.
I don't think it's true that British people have like bad teeth. We don't all get orthodonty, so they were kind of crooked, but I don't think we're necessarily like less strong.
Trust me,
teeth.
It's the same here. A, my mom is British. B, I was the second child at a time of divorce, so my brother got everything, including orthodonture. I got none of that, so it's why all my smiles are closed mouth whenever you see the Gil selfies online. But we've all got our hang-ups of sorts, but
yeah, well, the somatic experiencing people would say that you missed out on a whole bunch of like skeletal trauma there. So maybe there's an upside. Who knows?
All I can think of is Martin Amos's horror stories of all his dental processes, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Tell me about finding the visual style for this book. You have talk about the visual style and how you developed it. And you mentioned it being a crash course almost in producing a 300-page graphic novel.
Pretty much. I mean, I think a lot of the visual figuring out of the story was worked out in the thumbnails, and I made my thumbnails as kind of like tight and as fleshed out as possible, so that when it came to it, I could just like lightbox my final pages. You know, I had to work quite small because of the time, the time limits. So the pages were like 9x6, I think. No, sorry, that's wrong. 9x12 inches. I'm a metric person, so I always struggle with inches.
You guys and your A5s and everything else too.
yeah, that's more my ballpark. But really, so my thinking going into it was that my family story is so complicated and messy. Like, it's really like a soap opera, and to kind of connect all those threads, I felt that the artwork had to be kind of like as simple and just kind of like tell the story as cleanly as possible. So I really didn't try to do too many visual pyrotechnics. There's a lot of like white space left on the page. I got that idea. There's a cartoon in the UK called Danger Mouse, and they often set it in the Arctic.
I used to watch it as a kid.
They often set it in like the North Pole, the Arctic, because they didn't have time to like draw all the backgrounds and stuff. And it's like, I can Danger Mouse this. Just leave a lot of white space and just draw what I need to tell the story. And also the fact is that I wanted the pace to be quite I was really concerned about the pace of the story, and I wanted it to keep moving along, because there's so much in it. And some of the feedback I've had from readers is that they read it in like one or two sittings, like it was a kind of like a fast read, and then they went back and kind of like absorbed the juicier bits, in their own time. But I did want it to be like a well-paced book that kind of read like a novel, and so I did have this idea that I just want the artwork to kind of keep thrusting the movement forward. And also the fact that it's kind of set in the present day and my present life, which was really nice. Like, I had a good life, even though I was so anxious. And so I was trying to draw it as like kind of colorful and draw the colorful accessories and bags and clothes. Like, I had a lot of fun with that, drawing the patterns on my therapist's shirt and stuff. So all the details of like my modern, bright and comfortable life that I wanted to actually be able to fully enjoy, I wanted that to be part of it too.
And then flashing back to especially the 80s era. And I appreciate your half-sister's haircut, that sort of post-Princess Di look that you had going.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And I used a lot of like undertones and like dark blues and like different colors for like dream sequences and stuff, just to show, this is the murky past that you have to kind of like delve into. So,
yeah. What did it teach you about storytelling? Going from the online strips into this fuller form. Did you think you had a 300-page book in you first?
I did. I mean, I did a book called Sky and Stereo, which it started off as a mini comic and became like a 2-part graphic novel, kind of based on the Persepolis model. So I knew I had like a long book in me, because that book is like 320 pages if you put it together. What it taught me about writing a comic is very nuts and bolts. It's about scenes. Like, each scene has to kind of like work independently and kind of be worthy of a reader's time. So something has to happen. You can't just have like baggy filler in there. You have to kind of get to your point. And I think I learned a lot from like writing novels, and I actually studied, what makes a memoir. Like what's the point of it? Like, what makes a good one? So I read a lot of memoirs before I wrote this. I think I'm trying to remember some of the names but I read actually like text memoirs, to sort of see how they were kind of like structured. And so, I basically like taught myself like how to write a memoir and how to make it novelistic. And I think I succeeded in that. I think I made something that's very readable and that doesn't drag, even though it's got a lot of heavy content in it. And there is the process of time unfolding in it. So
it's definitely got what I call thrust. It's got that impulsive nature where the book keeps you wanting to read. And I think the chapter structures and the lengths that you use in this, it all fits formally to make something that the reader is actually going to be, engaged in. And then that's a delivery system for this incredible story and the process that you go through. So,
well, thank you. And I should also say that I did work with a really good editor who kind of helped me get there. You know, I didn't do this all by myself. And so my editor is Lucia Watson, who's the book that she might be well known for is Marbles by Ellen Forney.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a really, she had a great laser focus on like what wasn't necessary, what can be left out, and what we need to actually tell, this story in a very dynamic way. So yeah, her help on that was fantastic. And it was the first time I'd gotten to work so closely with an editor who kind of really knew what she was doing, so that was really cool.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing, especially in the comics world for cartoonists I know who come up in that indie way. You're sort of on your own. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you end up with a Fanta or Drawn and Quarterly or something, and there is some editorial connection. But, when it really turns into, this is how book publishing works, that process and being able to work with somebody can be a big change for a lot of people. So I'm
definitely glad it did level me up, like as a writer, I think, like working with Lucia. And it also, you're not just working like with an editor, you're working with like a whole team of people as well, like when it comes to production and stuff. And it really reminds you, like, you're working with an industry. I mean, this was my first time working with a major publisher, and you just have to kind of be open to criticism and not, because people you just have to sort of be like on board with other people's input. And it was good. It was a good like check to my ego. It's like, I'm really fortunate to be working with this like really dedicated team of people. And it's like, if something's not working, it's like, okay, yeah, I just have to take some time and sort of acknowledge that, even though it might be one of my favorite things in the book. It's like, if it has to go, it has to go,
Yeah. There's the kill your darlings moment.
Your darlings, yeah. And the thing is, I feel like the darlings always kind of find a way to get in another project or something, So like one of the things with this book is there was a section about, I used to like horse ride when I was like 11. There was a horse riding school near me. And so there was a bit about horse riding, which I feel like really kind of helped my trauma. But we couldn't work these pages into the book. But I've written another book, which we're going to hopefully be, putting on submission this fall. And horse riding as therapy has totally found its way in there. So nice. Like, okay, your darlings don't die, Yeah,
it's the law of conservation of ideas and energy. I figure
absolutely.
The ideas stick around. As long as you keep a folder somewhere, yes. They'll be there. Yeah. But can you tell me about next book, or is that something you kind of want to?
No, I can tell you about it. I feel like the shell has set on it because I have. So I've written a young adult book. It's a fiction book, and it's about 3 teenagers who are either in or connected to a high control religion, which is very much like the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't call them that because I didn't want to use the name Jehovah through the book, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses call God. And so I've made it more of a generic high control Christian sect who go out knocking on doors, a bit like the Mormons do as well, And so, it's about those 3 characters, 3 teenagers who were my daughter's age when I wrote the book. So they're 15. And one of them is hiding, like a sexual trauma that she ends up in therapy for. The other one is secretly what we call PMO, which means physically in, mentally out. Like he has to keep pretending to be in this church, even though he doesn't believe in it at all. And then the third character, his mum has kind of like his mother has joined up, I should say. They're American. And he's freaked out that his mom has joined a doomsday cult. And so, I got to kind of like process a lot of like the unfinished, unresolved work around being an ex-Jehovah's Witness kid, like through these characters. So it was a really fantastic process for me. I've completely thumbnailed the whole book, and I found a younger artist who is going to do the final art, and she has drawn the first chapter, and we've colored it, and I'm currently writing the book proposal, and it's very scary. I hate this process, but this is the next steps to getting another book deal, I hope, touch wood. So
first time you've written for another artist?
I wouldn't say written for another artist because I've
first time somebody's drawn.
Yeah, it is the first time. Yeah, I've thumbnailed it, and for me, what's important about a book is like the emotional acting. Like the way the characters express physically what's going on with them, and so the artist is very closely like following what I've drawn and the page layouts and all that stuff. So they're doing the final art, but I still feel like it's my book visually, even though it's got a really fantastic, like, young adult style to it, Yeah.
I remember being a kid and not understanding the difference between, like, breakdowns and, pencils when I was reading my superhero comics as a kid. And it was the what happened to Daredevil that, and not understanding that Klaus Janson had basically taken, a couple of drawings by Frank Miller and turned it into the comic. This is, showing myself in my terrible superhero days, but it does raise the question.
My husband is into the same stuff, so I'm sat here surrounded by Silver Age Flash, and it's all that.
Hated Carmine Infantino when I was a kid. Appreciate him now.
Yeah, I really like him.
And as a kid, I didn't get Kirby when I was a little kid either. So, I got into that with Ryan Hughes. We had a big conversation about how we grow into the things that we should have appreciated at, little kiddom. But what was your comics upbringing? How did you come into the form?
Yeah, so I didn't read superheroes. I read, because I'm British, we had like the Beezer and the Beano, and it was very much like short comics for kids, like with crazy characters and schoolboy antics and that kind of stuff. I had a lot of boy cousins, and so I would inherit a lot of comics from them. I also read Mad Magazine when I was a kid. My mom had a boyfriend who went to America, and he'll bring me back those Mad paperbacks from New York.
You've got that panel in the comic.
So that was, I got to meet Sergio when I was in CXC a couple of years ago. Sergio
I remember that one. That was great.
It was just like my inner child was just exploding. It was so good.
That a whole lot of us had the bowing down before the great Sergio.
He was just so cool. It was wonderful. Mad Magazine, and then like British comedy comics like the Beano and the Beezer, and then I think around just before my adolescence, there was a comic called Nikki, which was like a girls' romance comic. And I was kind of really into those for a while. And then one day I just was like, this is garbage. Why am I reading this? This is like so stupid. So I put those away. And I didn't think about comics again until I was in my late teens. And there was a comic called Deadline, which you could buy like at the newsstand. And it had Jamie Hewlett in it, Nuka Badsis, all these like great British cartoonists, Philip Bond. And it was a combination of like the music that I was into and these great comic strips.
Oh, and that's right in the early 90s. That's perfect for me.
That's right. It was so good. And they were rerunning Gilbert Hernandez and Jaime Hernandez's work, which is the first time I'd ever seen that. And then right on the heels of that, my best friend, he kind of like basically dumped Hate number 1 and 8 Ball number 8. I was looking at a kiosk and he's like, here's something to read.
Don't read that. Read this. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is kind of what I want to do. And so I went to university and studied literature, and I knew I wanted to be a writer of some kind. But when I discovered like Klaus and Bag and like Julie Doucet's work, I was like, I want to be a cartoonist. And that was really it.
Yeah. Have you gotten to meet any of your other heroes in that way? And, have you had calm moments around them?
So I started doing mini comics like in the, I guess, late 90s, I think. By the time I actually got my act together and put some comics out, it was like the mid to late 90s. And we sent a copy to Peter Bagg, and we sent a copy to Dan Clowes, like physical copies, to their PO boxes. And Dan Clowes sent me like a postcard back. He sent me 2 postcards actually. So that was amazing. I don't think I would have continued making them had he not sent that. So that was really a big thing. And then Peter Bagg wrote back and said it was really funny, and that was amazing too. So it's like, okay, I feel like I've got permission here. I never heard back from Julie Doucet. I did write to her too, but that's okay. And I mean, I ended up marrying a cartoonist. I married like Ted May. That's why I live in St. Louis. So,
yeah. Is there any hope for your kid being in a 2 cartoonist household? I mean, do you have any hope she'll find another career? I'm just kidding, but
yeah, no. Chances are she's. I think she's already pretty much a cartoonist, though. She claims not to be. She's really into OGs, creating original characters, and she really likes like video game modeling, like modeling characters for video games, and just drawing and coming up with stories. So she's really into animation and comic books and video games. And so I think one of those 3 fields is going to get her. She's really good at drawing. She's so good. So.
That's always got to be the creepy part when the kid's better and they're like, well, I couldn't do that when I was young.
She's kind of already better than me, I think. And she's like a digital native, so she can kind of color online. She colors digitally and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, chances are she's going to follow in our footsteps.
Nice. It's interesting. The first time it came up was when I was recording with John Porcellino years ago. But what you were saying about literally just sending copies to a PO box that your favorite cartoonists owned instead of I'll email something or I'll put something on Instagram and get likes. Like it's such a different world that we came up in, where there was that sense of connection and that validation that came months and months later from, a postcard. I do have a Klaus postcard, but from a completely different context. I will send you a picture of it after this because it's one of the funniest things I've ever gotten. This is like 1995 or so. So going way back, but yeah, that sense that we came up in a world where those people were not distant, that they were humans that you could aspire to or you could reach out to in a certain way that was different than the virtual. Just, it's something that when you mention digital natives always seems strange to me that like, there's email and that's fine, but it's not the same thing as sending a letter or a postcard or a zine.
And just how like our culture is like a scarcity thing, you had to really like dig through comic shops to find like the Fantagraphic books, or like to just find the odd thing that you would like. It was like hard to find stuff that I was really like looking for because it didn't really seem to exist yet, so much has kind of come up since then, and so many artists have been published since the 90s. But it really did feel like a special magical thing that I was kind of like finding for myself, and obviously meeting my husband Ted May, that was kind of like part of the romance of it. It's like, wow, this cartoonist I can kind of reach out to, and his work is awesome, and oh look, he's cute as well. Can you finally like find a picture of him on some blog somewhere, some SPX blog, and it's like, okay. And now everything exists online and it doesn't have that same feeling. Everything feels like it kind of blends together a little bit more.
The infinite jukebox can be a little
exactly.
So I'm glad we still hunt things down and discover things periodically, but that's sort of why I make this. But
and I still like hard copies. I still prefer to read on paper, but I
don't think I've ever sent you my two zines. I've got to get your mailing address.
No, you actually did. Thank you for sending those. You
Good.
did,
okay. Because the third one and the book are in process. So those are the other things Gil will make that have no digital analog for, or no digital copy. So
I know Frank Santoro does a lot of that as well, and it makes it special.
And those are very much, Frank's things are very much in the form that they're in. Those excessively folded zines as he sends them around. But
it's funny, isn't it, how he's like an influencer but like an offline one.
It's so, but that's what we came up in, that era where again it took word of mouth. It was occasionally something would get mentioned in the Comics Journal where it would be like, oh, I need to go check this book out. But it was so often, you found some tastemaker or somebody else who would tell you. I always have the story. I was a superhero guy until getting to college. And my first semester, there was a drummer from Texas on my dorm floor. He's like, dude, don't read the X-Men. You got to read Love and Rockets, and handed me an issue of L&R. And that just blew my mind and, never turned back. But yeah, we have that we're a couple of old timers, I guess, in that respect. So,
it's a funny thing because I was just thinking about how like Gen X, we haven't had like a Gen X president yet. You know what I mean? We have a Gen X prime minister in the UK, but I just feel like baby boomers had their time for such a long time and they still haven't relinquished it yet, and we're going to be completely skipped over it. It goes straight to, I think our next president will probably be a millennial, right? And I
think I'm okay with that. I think us not getting blamed for stuff might be good.
Okay, I'll take that.
Because there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal recently on executives getting skipped over the same way, like Gen X. People who spend 25 years at company think they're going to move up, but you're a little too close to retirement age, so let's just go with somebody who's 35 or 40.
Right.
And it's like, that guy's not going to get blamed for the company tanking, so, maybe it's a good thing that we're kind of being overlooked. But
That's a very Gen X perspective. I like it.
Yeah, like I said, we had this whole latchkey thing. We had fear of nuclear annihilation. Let's just lie low for a while and let everybody else screw things up. But tell me, one of the things I'm interested in, with past tense, you're Sacha. You're not Iris. You're yourself. How conscious a decision was that for you, or was it something you had to kind of grow into when it came to memoir, actually, being who you are?
It's a really good question, and it wasn't really a question that came up for me because I'd kind of grappled with the idea that if I'm going to write about therapy, then I need to be disclosive and I need to be completely honest and transparent. Like, it's the only way for it to work. Like, I've read books which talk about trauma. I've read comics which deal with trauma, let me say that. And they're very suggestive. You know, they suggest that something's happened, but they don't actually come out and spell what it is. And I can think of certain books, but I'm not going to name any names, but it's, you know, they're beautiful and yet they're not exactly kind of helpful to me. I know that when I was going through my therapy, I needed kind of concrete facts, you know, I needed concrete advice. And one of the pages in the book is where I'm, you know, it's like I'm walking down the street and the tiles of the pavement are all these books I've been reading and all, you know, therapy books and psychology books. And it's like, I need this like hard information because it feels like what I've been missing. It's what nobody gave me when I was a kid. And so I needed to be part of that. I couldn't like vague book this. I had to like be very concrete and definite. And this is what happened to me. And this is why I developed the coping strategies I developed that by the age of like 40 were not working for me anymore. This is why I was kind of like falling apart inside at the age of 40. And, you know, it's like I'm being specific about it, but I'm also translating myself to the second dimension. So it's like a picture of me. It doesn't feel like that's me when I read the book in a way, because I think I've, you know, not only have I processed it in therapy, but I also process it like through 2 scripts, 2 rounds of like thumbnails and like a final art and then scanning and digitally cleaning up. And it's like, I've been through this so many times that this no longer feels like raw and pertinent for me. This is like healed. And this is something I feel like affectionate towards and kind of comfortable sharing. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate.
The book retains the sense of immediacy. Like at least in the telling, it never feels like, oh, but that's all in the past. I'm much better now. I mean, it is in the moment, and current Sacha is not feeding that sense of past tense into past tense. I'll put it that way. You know, it does feel like it's that processing and that sense of becoming is captured on the page, not seen as a retrospective thing. So,
it's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's there are ways we can let the present self bleed back into the past self to make certain things look like, oh, but I was dumb when I thought that, you know, and avoid that temptation.
I was constructing it from my sketchbook. So, you know, I would like draw my therapy session like on the Metrolink on the way back from therapy. And so like I had it all down on paper. And so it was kind of like being true to that, you know. Obviously there were things I had to change, like names and places and identifying, you know, details. But, you know, the actual like the kind of raw emotion, it was present tense to me. It was all coming up, even though it was like 30-year-old trauma, you know. And so, yeah, I'm glad it still has that immediacy.
Yeah, you mentioned the comics upbringing. Did you have any of the autobio people besides Julie, of course? Because everybody you mentioned is more, again, Klaus, Bag, etc., more fiction. Even if Bag's stuff is a twisted reflection of his own life. You know, I'm thinking of for me, it was like the Joe, Matt, Chester Brown, Seth thing, and then everybody who sort of sprung from there, like Adrian and people like that. Was that ever part of your curriculum, I guess, as you were educating yourself in comics?
Do you know, I would say like during my 30s, at least, it was very much the sort of the female perspective of that. Joe Matt didn't really appeal to me. It was just too...
Oh, I can understand exactly why. Don't worry.
Too masculine and sweaty for me. But I know Persepolis was like a really kind of important book for me when I discovered that. Gabrielle Bell's work, you know, which is like very much diary comics and just like kind of like just putting these details of life, which are so well observed and funny. And the kind of the way she draws as well, at least the way she drew 10 years ago. I'm not quite sure what her style is now, but you know, she would draw these 3/4 length you know, people with not too many close-ups and stuff. I mean, I didn't stick to that in my book, but I was very much informed by it. I think another book that really kind of affected me when I read it was Belonging by Nora Krug, like the way she deals with the family past and her own inner detective, you know, the way she's piecing all that together. Those were really informative books. And Sarah Glidden as well, like her, you know, she used full watercolor for her book about Israel. And just the way she kind of like shows herself like interacting in her world. Because I found that quite informative and helpful, for sure.
Yeah, where do you feel you got better as a cartoonist?
I hope so. I still struggle with my artwork. I'm very much, like I am this Generation X kind of like punk kid who grew up making indie comics, and suddenly I'm doing like a mainstream book for Penguin, and like I compare myself to the stuff that came out that year, and I'm pretty hard on myself because it's like I'm never going to be like Maurice Velikoop's book, for example.
Well, yeah,
like,
well,
it just makes me want to go hide in a closet, Well, I'm currently reading like Craig Thompson's Ginseng Roots, and again, it's just like, why am I making comics? Like this is not a healthy place for me to be in, And so it's like, okay, I also appreciate a lot of artists who aren't that polished and aren't that perfect. Like, for example, oh my goodness, I'm totally Malika Gharib. She did a fantastic book called "It Won't Always Be Like This," and I just love her work so much. And her stuff is like so like raw and out of her sketchbook, and I just love it, And so I don't have this critical, like inner critic towards other people the same way I do for myself. So I hope it made me a better cartoonist. I think it's made me a better storyteller for sure. And I think as a cartoonist, I'm always going to land on the writerly end. Like I spend a lot of time studying writing and like, trying to like figure out the nuts and bolts of it. Like I'm currently trying to figure out how to write comedy. Like my husband, Ted May, he writes a lot of like comedies, and it's like, how do you do that? Because I can make jokes in real life, but how do you put that on a page? And so I feel like I'll always be a student of writing, and my artwork is always going to have to kind of catch up with that. And so I'm always going to be playing catch up. I ultimately think of it as a language, it's like a communication tool. And I think it succeeds at that. Like I get feedback from readers, which is so touching and poignant and makes me feel like this is an important thing to talk about, So yeah, on that level, remembering that it is a communication tool, and so long as it has clarity and is readable and looks okay, I'm good.
And you're always able to differentiate your character from others by giving yourself the bump in the nose. So.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's my therapist called me on that. It's like, why do you draw yourself like you prettier in real life? I'm like, well, thank you, but I think there's enough like Disney princesses out there. I don't need to join them, thank you. So. And
cartooning language, we always need the things that differentiate, just to that sort of shorthand we all use.
So, yeah, exactly. There will be no cartooning nose jobs in this corner of the world. Yeah.
So I have to ask something that becomes sort of meta and all encompassing, which is something I asked last week's guest, and something that's been on my mind for years now. Do you think of change as a sort of outward process, like a sort of an unfolding into something else, or more about finding a core self that you kind of get under everything that's piled up? Where does change consist, I guess, as a person in your conception?
Yeah, I think of it as evolution, Yeah. I think we're all still evolving, and as a species, as a human species, we are evolving. And for me, I think this inner core, it's almost a spiritual thing for me. Like I don't have like an outward faith, and I'm not sure what my spiritual beliefs are, but I do believe that there is something like core and intrinsic about being human. And we can access so much when we tap into that. So yeah, I definitely believe it's an inward thing that we have to take the time to sort of do this work. And if you think about, like a plant or a butterfly, like it kind of like destroys itself, like when a mussel grows, it kind of rips itself apart and then rebuilds and stuff. And so I think it always has to be kind of internal. And the fact that modern culture puts so much emphasis on kind of appearances and outwards, it's kind of missing the key components of growth. I think it's like going inside is how we get better, and how we get better at being humans.
Good answer. I'm puzzling through it myself, trying to figure out where change consists, or whether or not I'm changing it as part of.
Do you know Andrew Weil, the big hippie?
Yeah, I remember the bald guy with the beard, right? Yeah.
I really like him. He's like the online doctor I go to when I'm worried about something, right? And he's very sensible. But he talked about like, as a human species, like we share DNA with like chimpanzees, and we share it with bonobos. And chimpanzees are very much like this warring tribal kind of like race of creatures. And the bonobos are very much more kind of like gentle, and they kind of like look after each other and sort of tend to each other, and they're more matriarchal. And Andrew Weil suggested that because we have like both possibilities within us, we could like turn up the bonobo and turn down the chimp. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of my life is like, how do I turn down the chimp and turn up the bonobo? It's a pretty good way to live. At the age of 50, I'd recommend it to others. Yeah.
It might become the mantra for my next meditation session. Turn up the bonobo, turn down the chimp. That's
enjoy.
Because eventually those things, they start to lose all meaning and you get to the core of it all. But two questions. One, relating to the parenting thing, you do mention in the book we'll say coincidental but periodic nature of the women in your lineage all experiencing some significant trauma or some big change of life at 17 or so.
Yeah.
You mentioned your kid is 16 at this point, and that a big part of your processing was, again, helping make sure this doesn't transmit the way it was in an unknowing way. How conscious are you of that sort of milestone pending and what you can and can't control and how to help your kid live a better life?
I'm totally conscious of it. Yeah. Okay. It's my hope the chain is broken, and that any crisis that befalls will come from the external world, which I can't control, rather than an inner one. I feel like my kid has tools and resources that I didn't have at 17. And so whatever life throws at us, I feel like she might be able to steer her ship better than I did and make better choices than I did, and she's supported. She's not alone. She knows that. Yeah. But in terms of like a war breaking out when she's 17, I worry about that every day and I can't control it. So stick close to your community, folks, and do the inner work. That's how you get through this one,
Gotcha. Which I appreciate. There's a lot of challenges, and as someone without kids, I always have the trying to understand, what is happening in your life and the patterns that have been created for you and that you create, and how those are affecting people down the line, which is part of why I don't have kids. I'll be honest. Yeah. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into past tense and, how you show that echoing through the generation upon generation at this point. The last big question, which I should have prepared you for, I apologize for not emailing in advance, but what have you been reading?
Well, I mentioned Craig Thompson. I'm reading Ginseng Roots right now. I just read Alison Bechdel's Spent, which was sheer delight. I loved that book so much. It was really funny and satisfying and wonderful. In terms of fiction and nonfiction, I just read John Sardar's In the Valley of the Noble Beyond, which it's like a travel book about going to British North Columbia in search of Sasquatch and collecting the stories. And he's such a good writer, and it's such a profound book, and it's more about like the spiritual symbolism of Sasquatch. So that was fantastic. Loved that book, and he's got a new one coming out, so I'm really excited for that. So that's John Sardar.
Yes, he's Z-A-D-A.
Z-A-D-A, yeah. And then because times are difficult, I'm reading, and I'm of the age of menopause, I'm reading the best old lady of all time, which is Doris Lessing. I'm like rereading a bunch of books by her. So I'm working through her Children of Violence series, which she's so great. She's just this solid, dependable, concrete vixen of a person, and she lived through Stalin and Hitler, and she kind of lost her way a few times and joined the Communist Party, which is a cult, and she realized it was a cult and she kind of got out of it, and she went on to get like a Nobel Prize for Literature. So Doris Lessing is my heroine, and I'm really leaning heavily on her in these menopausal difficult times we're living in. So she's great.
I'll say, as somebody who has never read her, should I just start with a Golden Notebook, or is there some pick you have for a person's,
I would
for a man's first time?
Martha Quest, because it's just so immediate and short, and it's just got all this like teenage fury, and she's just so angry at the political situation in Zimbabwe, where she kind of grew up, and being one of the privileged white class, and she's also dirt poor, and there's all this stuff going on in it, and she's just so full of fury and frustration, and it's a fantastic book. So I would start with Martha Quest, and if you like her voice, then I would dive into the Golden Notebook, which is a bit more of a commitment. It's a heavy book, but I love the Golden Notebook too. The excuse I always have is, I have to do too much reading for the podcast, but it does become an excuse. And historically, it becomes an excuse as to why I always make exceptions for male writers and not female writers. So, I'm trying to be a little more equitable
we'll say.
Yeah, I'm really deliberately leaning into reading as a way to sort of get offline, especially in the evening. You know, I've had enough. I've had enough of like the constant news cycle by then. So if you give me a novel from the 1950s, that's good.
Nice. And that's your era of choice generally?
Yeah. So I did literature at college, and basically the 1930s to the 1960s is like where I keep landing. Like I love Nabokov and Sylvia Plath and just Anais Nin and all the people who lived through the tumult of the 30s and kind of went on to sort of have a good time in the 50s and 60s, or not in the case of Sylvia Plath. Yeah, that seems to be my era that I really kind of enjoy reading.
Nice. So I have to make more notes for people I need to start reading because, again, I need to seem like I'm educated and well-rounded when I talk to you folks. So,
Oh, my library like to read list is like so long, and there's so much I'm not getting to. But yeah, it's good to prioritize a little bit of offline time right now, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, the last thing I do want to tell you is, as it relates to therapy, the key reason we're not recording this in person is because if I came out to St. Louis to see you, I would have to see my mother also. And I do my best to really avoid that. Luckily, she never listens to the show. So
that is good. Yeah. My mom gives me like a nice sensitive wide berth around my work. Like she got a copy of the book and she's proud of me, but I don't think she read it too deeply. So I get that. Yeah.
All things considered.
Well, maybe one day we can meet in St. Louis when.
Yeah, I'll say British mothers. That's probably for them. Oh, we don't talk about those things. You know, that's.
Well, we have other reasons to visit St. Louis. We have like Dan Zetwock lives here, and my husband Ted May.
I was going to say I got to record with Ted sometime too. You know,
he's got a book coming out this fall, so that'd be great. We need to send you a copy. Yeah.
Geez, now I'm going to have to see my mom. Oh well, but that's fine. The things I do for this podcast, I tell you. Yeah.
That's right. And Thanksgiving. It's you've just got to do what you got to do, right?
Listen, those are stories I could tell you offline. But anyway, well, that's good enough. But Sacha, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for the forbearance in waiting for me to catch up because
that's been a delight. Yeah.
You did a fantastic book. You made a fantastic book. You went through something incredible, and like I said, without friends who helped me fix things about myself, I would not have been as good or an appreciative a reader for this book. So,
thank you, and I really appreciate that. And I know you are going through your own like turmoil right now. I listened to some of your podcast about your eulogy for your father, and so this is not difficult stuff that we have to take on board and deal with and process and get out the other end. But I hope my book shows that there is another side, to the trials we go through, and that we can
and that we're not alone. Yeah,
we're not alone
with
we
ourselves.
Come out shining, not just swinging, but we can like shine a little bit. Our hearts have a lot of capacity for healing, and I really do believe that.
And that was Sacha Mardou. Go get Past Tense. It's out now from Avery, which is part of Penguin Random House. It really is a fantastic memoir, and I'm glad she nudged me about it last year, and I'm glad something in my head told me it was time for me to read it last week and set this up. Also, I was joking about my mom, but I know she's not going to listen to this anyway. Still, you should check out Sacha's site, mardouville.com, for more about her work and her therapy comics. And that's MARDOUVILLE.com. You should also follow her on Instagram as Mardou_draws, which is MARDOU_DRAWS, and on Blue Sky at Mardou Comics, and Patreon and Etsy as Mardou. All of it is MARDOU. I'll have links to all this stuff in the show and episode notes for this one. Thanks for listening to the Virtual Memories Show. You can support this podcast by telling other people about it. There's no better way to build an audience than through word of mouth. Also, visit Apple's podcast page for us and leave a rating and review. Every little bit helps, You can also support the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it, and who you'd like to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or book or piece of music or comic or theater or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me a postcard, letter, email, DM if we're connected on Instagram or Blue Sky, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. Messages can be up to 3 minutes long. It'll cut you off after that, so call back and leave another message if you do. And let me know if it'd be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something interesting to share with our listeners, but I'd never run someone's message without their permission, so let me know. Now, if you've got money to spare, I appreciate it, but don't give it to me. I've got a day job that pays the bills. You should give to individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Crowdfunder, Indiegogo, all those crowdfunding platforms, where you'll find people who really need help just trying to make ends meet or get an artistic project going, covering medical bills or car payments or veterinary bills, and just a few dollars from you might make a real difference in their lives. Now, when it comes to institutions, I give to my local food bank and World Central Kitchen every month, but there are a lot of other things you can give to the Poor People's Campaign, Freedom Funds, Election Funds, Planned Parenthood, and Women's Choice. There's a lot of things you can do with your money to try to help build a better world, so I hope you'll give. Now, our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can visit my archives at vmspod.com to check out my 2018 conversation with Hal, where you can learn more about his art, his music, and more. And you can follow Hal on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. That's MAY, the number 4, TH. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download all our past episodes at Apple Podcasts and other podcast sources. And you can find all my episodes and sign up for the Virtual Memories Show newsletter at vmspod.com. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram and YouTube as vmspod. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.